Hey guys, this is Scott with the Potter's Wheel Ministry, and we're going to begin to look at the Torah portion for this week. We're going to uh, divide the Torah portion up this week into two separate teachings. So at this time, I want us to look at Leviticus 19. This portion this week was a little shorter. What we found was Leviticus 19 through Leviticus 20, and then we had the prophets, and then the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament. So we're going to teach on the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament portion, later in the week, and then also remember we'll have a Sabbath teaching posted also this coming Sabbath. We will begin to teach on a little bit of the book of Ephesians, Paul's letter to the Ephesians. But tonight I want us to look at Leviticus 19 a little bit and kind of shotgun this, some things that we can pull out of this Torah portion or look into. But it says in Leviticus 19:1, and Yahovah spoke unto Moses, saying, speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel. So one of the things we point out is that all the congregation, everybody heard what Yahovah was going to speak through Moses. And he said, and say unto them, ye shall be holy. Now I want to look at this, ye shall be holy. This phrase, or this word shall be, means to be, or to become, or to come to pass. So we can look at this part where he says, ye shall be holy. Now we understand that this word holy means sacred. It means set apart. So you shall be set apart. Now let's stop and look at this. Let me go back a little bit before I get ahead of myself, and let's look at this ye shall be, okay? As I said, it means to be or become or come to pass. So we could look at this and add these words, these definitions of this phrase here, which is hayah is the word. And we could say, you shall become separated. You shall become sanctified. You shall become set apart. Or we can even say like this, it shall come to pass that you will be set apart. You will be sanctified. You will be separate. So, but there's no getting around it. That Yahovah told the congregation, the children of Israel, that you will be. It's almost like a. This is not the correct word I'm looking for, but in the affirmative, you're going to be set apart. You're going to be sanctified. You're going to be separated. And now he goes on and says, for Yahovah your God, for I, Yahovah your God, your Elohim, am set apart. I am your God. I'm set apart. So you have no other choice. You don't have an option. If I am going to continue to be your God, I am set apart. I am sacred. I am separate. I am holy. Then you don't have any choice but yourself to be set apart, sanctified, sacred, and holy. And then he goes on, verse 3, to say, Ye shall fear every man his mother and his father, comma, and keep, this word keep, this shemer, my Sabbaths. This word, it means to guard, it means to hedge about, it means to protect, it means to observe. So he says you're going to be set apart. You're going to have a reverence for your mother. You're going to have a reverence for your father. And you are going to guard, hedge about, protect, observe, keep my Sabbaths. Here again. And he tells us why. I am YHVH, your God. And if we look on down through this verse, this chapter 19 of Leviticus, he's going to say in verse 4, once again, I am YHVH, your God. Verse 10, he's going to give some instruction again. And then he's going to say, I am YHVH, your God. Verse 12, give some instruction. And then say, I am YHVH. Verse 19, once again, he said, you shall keep, this is the same word, to hedge about, to protect, to observe, to keep my statutes, his commandments, is what he says you are going to keep those things. And the same thing. Why? He doesn't come out and say it here in this verse, but it is because he is YHVH. If I am to be your God, you're going to be holy, you're going to be separated, you're going to be sanctified because I am. You're going to keep my Sabbaths because I am your God. You're going to keep my statutes because I am your God. I am YHVH. If we look on down verse 25, he says, I am YHVH your God. Verse 28, I am YHVH. Verse 30, we were just at. No, verse 30, he says, you shall keep, he's given a reminder in verse 30, you shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am YHVH. And then verse 31, here again, instructions. And then he says, I am YHVH your God. Same thing, verse 32. Verse 34, same thing. And then in verse 36, he gives some instructions. And then he says, I am YHVH your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. If we look at this word Egypt, when we begin to take it apart and to look at it, and let's do this, it's Mizraim. It is the Hebrew 46 or 47:14. If we go to, let's see here, 46:93. Let's go here. This is the same. This is from the word Matzor, which has with it a sense of limit, a besieged place, a fortified place. 46:92, it's a hemming in, or a siege, or a place of distress, a fortress, a fenced-in place. And he tells us here in Leviticus that this is where he had brought Israel out of. And this is the same thing he's done for you and I. If you are filled with his Spirit, that Ruach HaKodesh, that separated, that sanctified, that set apart Spirit, if that dwells in you, then he has brought you out of that fenced in place. You see, there are some who would say that to keep these things, that Yah has instructed in Leviticus 19 here for Israel to keep. There are those in Christianity that would say today that that's bondage. To keep the Sabbath is bondage. To keep his commandments is bondage. And I've heard that, and you've heard that, that it's bondage. But here in 1936 in Leviticus, what is he saying? I brought you out of that place that had you fenced in. That place that had you walled about. That place that had you besieged. That place that had you imprisoned. I brought you out of that place. That constriction, that choking place. He says, I brought you out of that. And verse 37 tells us what is our duty. He says, therefore shall you observe all my statutes and my judgments and do them. I am YHVH. That's what we see in Leviticus 19:36. We're going to come back to this, but I want to go to Leviticus 20. And we're going to pick this up again. Leviticus 20 and verse 7. He says, sanctify yourselves. To be clean, consecrate yourselves, hallow yourselves. Set yourselves apart. And he goes on, and be ye set apart, for I am, here it is, YHVH, your God. In verse 8, Leviticus 20 says, and ye shall keep my statutes and do them, for I am YHVH, which sanctify you. So here he's saying, I'm the one that's going to do this. You can't do it by yourself, but I'm going to cause you to do these things. You will do these things. But I want to go down to verse 13. We're going to come back to all this in a minute. But I want to go to verse 13 where it says, if a man also lie with mankind, as he lieth with a woman, both of them hath committed an abomination. Now, this part, we know that this is talking about homosexuality. And even today in Christianity, they will hammer this over and over and over again and declare that homosexuality is wrong, that it's an abomination before God, and that a person who does this is going to burn for eternity in hell, and they'll just on, and they, out of everything, they will pull this out. Now, if we go back for just a minute, and this is not the point I want to make in this Torah teaching entirely, but if we go back to Leviticus 19, there were some other things he said that said to sanctify yourselves, separate yourselves, you will keep my Sabbaths, you will follow my law. And all these other things, and Christianity forgets all of that. But Leviticus 20:13, they're going to remember this, and they're going to say, well, it's an abomination for a man to lie with a man. It's an abomination for a woman to lie with a woman. But let's go here just for a minute to Deuteronomy 12. And verse 29. And this is what it says. When YHVH thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee, whither thou goest to possess them, and thou succeedest them, and dwellest in their land, take heed to thyself, that thou be not snared by following them after they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. So this is more warning that he is giving to the people of Israel. Don't walk into these lands that I'm giving you and then ask, Don't be ensnared by the way they worship their gods. Don't ask how they done it. Don't even say, I'm going to do just like they did. Don't do that. Verse 31, thou shalt not do so unto Jehovah thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth, they have done unto their gods. And if we stop and look at this word just for a minute, abomination, it is an abhorrence. It is something disgusting. So they've done every disgusting thing that Yahovah hates. Even this word hates gives the whole thing of it is a stench. Even the word abomination is this foul odor into the nostrils of Yah. And they said, these people have done this, so don't you do that. For he says, they have done other gods, for even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. What things soever I command you, observe to do it, that thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it. So now let's look, these same people who want to hammer that this homosexuality is an abomination, it is a stench in the nostrils of God. He detests it, he hates it, and all of that is true. And they point to that, and they say it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. And it's the majority of these same individuals be the ones at Christmas time who'll drag a tree into their house, they'll decorate it, they'll hang greens in their house, their foliage, and they will put presents on the tree, and they will do all of these pagan customs when Yah says for his people not to do so, not to learn the way, because it is an abomination and he hates it. But see, they forget that part. So then another time of the year they will get these baskets, and they'll put fake grass in the baskets, and they'll give them to children, and the children will run and they'll play and they'll pick up these dyed eggs and put them in the basket, and they'll go and they'll have sunrise services and say, we're doing this because this is Resurrection Sunday. And it's the very thing that Yah says don't do, because the heathens have done that, and I hated it. It was a stench in my nostrils. But I have called you out to be separate. I've called you out to be sanctified. I've called you out to be set apart. So don't you intermingle. Do not get ensnared with these things. And the majority of Christianity runs right to it and does it anyway. But in Leviticus, going back to Leviticus, he tells us that we are to keep his statutes and his Sabbaths and his commands. We are to have a reverence for his sanctuary. But as I've already said, the majority of Christianity runs into, and they do these other things, these opposite things of what he has instructed his people to do. And so what message, we have to ask, what message is this sending to our Creator, to our God, to our Savior, Yeshua, when we do opposite of what he's instructed us to do? In Exodus 20, in verse 5, he tells us, well, let's go to verse 3. He says, thou shalt not have other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, YHVH thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. That hate me. And this is the same word hate that he uses in Deuteronomy that says it's a stench. It's odious. You become an enemy. You're my foe. You're my foe. So what he's saying is, he says, so if you do these things, then you're saying to me, let's break it down this way, that, Yah, you stink. Your things have a foul smell in my nostrils. It's kind of the message that we're sending to him when we go against his judgments, when we go against his statutes, when we go against his commandments, when we blatantly break his instructions. Yah says, you hate me. So what does verse 6 tells us? What he does, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep. This is the same word keep that we see in Leviticus 19. That protect, that hedge about, that observe, that keep my commandments. And so he says, if you do that, then you love me. Why? Because I am YHVH. Now, if we look at this YHVH, this means which is, which was, and which is to come. And if we were to go back and look at Leviticus 19, we're going to see this come up over and over, this YHVH. So I want you, if you go back and read that, to just say to yourself, even besides that, anywhere that you see, if you read the King James and you see Lord in all capitals, that's the name. But if you think which is, which was, and which is to come, keep that kind of in the front of your mind when you see these things. And that's important because we're going to see that occur again. But let's move on. So he says, I'm going to show mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Let's go and see, do we see this show up anywhere else in the Bible? This idea of loving him and keeping his commandments. And the answer is 100% yes, we do. This is what Yeshua says. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And this word in the Greek for the word keep means exactly the same thing that Shemer does in the Hebrew. Shemer even means to watch over. So this is even what this Greek word means here, 5083. It means to keep an eye upon, to guard, to protect, to prevent from escaping. So what does he say in Deuteronomy? What does Yah say in Deuteronomy? Don't add to or take away. And so it is our job as believers in Yeshua to guard and to protect and to keep the taking away any of these commandments. We're to guard them. We're to protect them. We're to watch over them. This Greek word means to hold fast. We are to hold these things close and make sure that no damage comes to these commandments. And Yeshua says, if you love me, that's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to do. I want to go back to Leviticus 20 again. And we're going to go back and look at verses 7 and 8. But before we do this, I want this love, if you love me. We're going to see not only does this theme of I am YHVH, I am which is, which was, and which is to come. Not only is he talking about being holy, you and I being holy, living holy, being separate. Not only is he talking about us keeping the Sabbath, not only is he talking about us keeping his statutes, his commandments, and doing them, but also through here we're going to see a theme of love. We've already seen part of this theme as we begin to tie scriptures together, that if we love him, we're going to do these things. But at the same time, we're going to see that he has a love for you and I in instructing us to do these things. But I want to go back and look at Leviticus 20 and 7. Sanctify yourselves, therefore, and be ye holy, for I am YHVH your God, and you shall keep my statutes and do them. I am YHVH which sanctify you. So he loves us enough that he gives us, not only does he tell us to do these things, but he gives Israel, if I can say it this way, he gives Israel the tools to do these things. And if we go to Numbers 15, we're going to see the tools. Numbers 15 and verse 37. And YHVH spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they shall put upon the fringe of the borders a ribbon of blue. And it shall be unto you for a fringe, that ye may look upon it and remember all the commandments of Yah, and do them, that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye also used to go a whoring. Verse 40, that ye may remember and do all my commandments, and be holy unto your God. Here it is. For I am YHVH. I am that which is, which was, and which is to come, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. We saw this in Leviticus. We saw this in Leviticus, the Torah portion, in chapter 19, the last couple of verses. Remember, Egypt is that fencing in place, that place that hangs you fenced in, that place of idolatry, that place of lawlessness, that place of sin. This is the place that Yah says, I brought you out of that. Why? To be your God. I am YHVH, your God. So he instructs Israel that on the corners of their garments, they are to put a ribbon of blue, the tzitzit, the fringes. as a reminder. A reminder of what? That you may remember to do all my commandments. And that in remembering that you will be holy, you will be sanctified, you will be separate from everybody else. And this is let me just stop here for just a moment. This is the very thing that woman with the issue of blood, this is the very thing when she saw Yeshua, she reached down and she grabbed these fringes. She grabbed these tzitzit. How did she know to do that? Because the prophecy says that there will be healing in his wings, not in his rings, in his wings. And when she saw Yeshua, she saw that Son of Righteousness, and said, "This is the one that the prophet has spoke about." So she grabbed that thing, and we see that Yeshua lived out the commandments perfectly. He was that walking, living, breathing Word, is what he was. But Yeshua gave Israel these as a visible sign, as a visible reminder. Keep my commandments. Be holy. Live separated. And so can you imagine as they walked and these tassels would swing on their garments? It was a constant reminder to love Yahweh, to love YHVH, to love God. A constant reminder not to covet, not to lie, not to steal, not to murder. A reminder that Sabbath is coming, that we are separated, that we are set apart, that we are holy, and that he is making us set apart and holy. A reminder. But even these little, or these tassels, as they were supposed to represent a reminder, if I can say it this way, it wasn't good enough. We know that Israel, even with the visible reminders, every day, a visible reminder, it wasn't good enough. And Yah understood that something more had to happen. Let's go to Ezekiel 36. And I lost this here. Ezekiel 36 in verse 26. And this is what Yah says. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And listen to what he says. And I will put my spirit within you. Here's the kicker. Here's what many do not understand. I'm going to put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you shall keep my judgments and do them. If we look at this word keep, it's the same word again that keeps coming up over and over again. Shamar, to hedge about, to guard, to protect, to observe. And he says, I'm going to put my spirit within you and cause you to do those things. You will Here again, he says, you shall. If we look in Leviticus 19, we look there in the second verse, where he says, you shall be holy. Same word here. You shall keep my judgments and do them. You're going to keep them. You're going to do them because I'm going to put my spirit within you. And that's going to happen. And we know that this all came to pass in Acts 2 when that spirit was poured out. Let's go to 1 John 2. In verse 4, because now this is a sobering statement that John makes. 1 John 2 and 4 says, he that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. If we go and look at this word keepeth in the King James, the word keep, it is the same word where Yeshua says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. This is the same Greek word here. And if we can remember what that word meant, it meant to guard, it meant to protect, it meant to keep from being taken away. Let's see if I can find something. Okay, it meant to prevent from escaping is what this word meant. So it means, this is what he's saying, if you don't do those things, if you don't keep the commandments, if you don't protect them, if you don't guard them, if you don't do them, if you don't observe them, if you don't keep some from being taken away. In other words, we've got to fight for these things, to keep these things that Yah has put into our possession. Hold on, just. I know this isn't stone, but this is what he's talking about. These commandments, these instructions, that, and this is just an example, but these are the same ones I have here behind me. We got to fight for this. We got to stand for this. Standing for these means we stand for Yah. We stand for Yeshua. And we know that these tablets, that Moses had 2 of them. But the scripture tells us that it wasn't 5 here and then 5 on this tablet, but it was front and back. Front and back. Because they were a copy for YHVH and a copy for the people. And in a teaching, and they were placed in the ark. In a teaching, we may do a reteaching on this. But even some words that talks about the ark meant to watch over, to guard, and to protect. We had to fight for these things. We have to fight. We have to stand for truth. And John says, if you don't do that, and you say you know him, you're a liar, and the truth is not in you. So for those who may be watching and do not know or do not understand what truth is, the scriptures define truth for us. And we have to use the same dictionary that John and Paul and the apostles used so that we understand what they were saying to us, what they were trying to get across the point. And this is what truth is. Psalms 119 and 142 says, "Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is truth." This is truth. If we're not doing these things, if we're not doing all of these things, if we don't have this in our heart, hide it in our heart, love it, protect it, guard it, observe it, keep it, then it's not really in us. And if we don't do those things and we say, "Oh, I know Yeshua. I know Yeshua. I'm following him." If we don't do these things, if we don't guard it, protect it, do it, then John says, you and I, or anybody else, is a liar. And as we begin to wind this down, I had said to remember that when we see that in the King James or maybe some other versions of the Bible, when we see the capital L-O-R-D, if you say Yahweh, Yahovah, we need to keep in mind that this Yahovah is that which is, which was, and which is to come. And I made the comment, do we see this anywhere else in the scriptures, in the Bible? So let's go to Revelation 1. And verse 4. And this is the same guy, the same writer. They just wrote what we read in 1 John. And this is what he says. "John, to the 7 churches which are in Asia, grace be unto you and peace from him, which is, which was, and which is to come." What is he saying? Grace and peace be unto you from Yahovah, which is, which was, and which is to come. Verse 8 says, "I am," and this is King James. I'm going to read what the King James says. "I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord." Okay, and this is all red letter here. Saith the Lord. So this is, you read Yeshua speaking. John says this is what, and some that watch this may disagree. That's okay. But John says this is what Yahovah says. Which is, which was, and which is to come, the Almighty. So how did John view Yeshua? As the which is, which was, and which is to come. Let's go to Revelation 4 and 8. It says, "And the 4 beasts had each of them 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within, and they rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Kadosh, 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 separated, 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 set apart, set apart, set apart, sanctified, 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 Yehovah Elohim Tzavaot, Lord God Almighty, which was and is to come." When we look at the name of Yah and what it means, and we take that and we apply that understanding to when we see the name, it will change the way that we view things in the scriptures. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a congregation and I was preaching there, and I had mentioned Acts 2, the day of Pentecost, and Jeremiah 31, where through Jeremiah, Yah gives us what the new covenant is. Who's going to write the law on our hearts, and how on the day of Pentecost that prophecy began to be fulfilled. But in Acts 2, and just let me go there, I wasn't planning on adding this. So I'm going to try to keep my train of thought as I go through this. But it says Acts 2:1, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, and suddenly there came a sound. This word sound can mean noise, it can mean a roar, but it can also mean echo. Echo. And so at this congregation, I brought that echo and said that the disciples and those that were there at the temple that day, that this Spirit was poured upon, when they heard that sound, they heard that echo from the prophecy in Jeremiah. They heard the echo from the prophecy in the book of Joel. And Peter said, this is that. At the same point, when we now look at the name Yahweh, YHVH, which is, which was, and which is to come, when we apply that now to the scriptures and put that understanding there, we're going to hear an echo, and that echo is going to be, I'm coming, I'm coming, I'm coming. That echo is going to be my commandments, my statutes, my judgments, my Sabbaths. Keep those things, guard those things. And in closing, I wasn't going to add this either, but I think that I will. Just give me a moment. And what we're going to see, and we're even going to hear the echo of this verse. Revelation 22:14 says, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gate into the city. For without are dogs, and sorcerers, and whoremongers, and murderers, and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. So out of this first part of this Torah teaching that we're doing on this portions this week, this will be part one. We'll, like I said, we'll do the Brit Hadashah later in the week. That will kind of tie into all of this theme together. But we're going to hear some echoes. And I want you to remember that in this first part is echoes, sounds of blessing, sounds of promise, sounds of prophecy coming forth. Echoes of those things that God said, I've got some things prepared for those who love me and those who keep my commandments, those who keep my Sabbaths, and I've got some things awaiting those that do not. Until later, when this was saying Shabbat Shalom.